But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
At stake is not just the future of Ukraine, it is an existential question for Europe as a whole.
The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions.
I will meet with Russians, with only one Russian guy, with Putin.
Any quick fix is a dirty deal.
Trump's decision to go it alone in pursuing peace deal with Vladimir Putin has unnerved both Ukraine and its European allies.
A half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago.
Ukraine and Europe fear that if they are not at the table in negotiations, Trump will deliver a favourable solution to Putin, much more so than Ukraine wants and much more so than the Western alliance wants. Now, Trump doesn't care at this point in time. He doesn't want the Europeans at the table, and controversially, at the moment, he doesn't want Zelensky at the table, the Ukrainian leader.
Only after we will have common plan with Trump, Europe, and we will sit with Putin and stop the war.
He believes that he alone has the power and the relationship with Putin to actually get a deal out of Putin. Now, the way Trump is going about this has certainly alarmed Ukraine and Europe. His attack on Zelensky, frankly, horrified much of the world, including people here in Australia.
Whether we decide to fall under the illusion that Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin are going to find a solution for all of us, and that would be a deadly trap.
The argument for what Trump is doing here is a fairly convoluted one, but it basically goes along these lines. Trump is trying to shake things up. He's trying to show to Putin that he has sympathies with Russia and with Russia's reasons for its invasion of Ukraine, and that he understands Putin's concern about NATO encroaching very close to his borders, and that he is ready and willing to make a deal with Putin. But they have already caused a lot of damage. Obviously in Ukraine, it has alienated Zelensky, who Trump will eventually need if he's going to strike a peace deal in Ukraine. It's alienated the Ukrainian people, who have suffered enormous horrors at the hands of Putin's soldiers after Putin's illegal invasion in February 2022. It's also horrified European nations who really wonder whether Trump is going to step up in any way to try and stop aggressors like Putin in the future. The US has said that US troops will not be a part of any peace deal in Ukraine. In other words, they won't actually be stationed in Ukraine, which raises some difficult questions for the European countries. They have got to decide whether they're going to step up and offer to have a peacekeeping force of European troops in Ukraine as part of any settlement. Now, the European leaders met this week in a bit of a panic after Trump sidelined them from the negotiations.
I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement.
They were split over whether a peacekeeping force involving European soldiers should be sent to Ukraine as part of any deal. And that's part of the reason why Trump is frustrated with Europe. He believes that Europe is not carrying its weight as far as paying for its own defence. Certainly, a lot of NATO countries have not got over 2% of GDP for defence spending even now, which is relatively low compared to the rest of the Western world.
But simply pointing out realism, like the borders won't be rolled back to what everybody would like them to be in 2014, is not a concession to Vladimir Putin.
But where does the Ukraine war go from here? Zelensky is in a very difficult position now.
Unfortunately, President Trump, who we respect a lot as a leader of the nation that we really respect, the American nation, who supported us all the time, unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space.
There's two key areas here. Firstly, the debate will go along territorial lines. Where should the carve up of territory be in any deal? Now, most experts believe the most logical place for this is simply the frozen front line that has barely moved over the past year, only with increments. And so basically Russia would take everything to the east of that, Ukraine would take everything to the west. Zelensky would lose 6% of Ukraine under that sort of deal. Now, I think that would be a deal that would be acceptable to Zelensky, reluctantly, but even so, he hasn't got much choice.
Ukraine regards any negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine as ones that have no result.
The US has already ruled out imminent NATO membership for Ukraine, so that really means that there'd have to be European peacekeepers on the Ukrainian soil to actually try to provide at least some sort of guarantee against a possible re-invasion of Ukraine by Putin in the future. This is very, very early days, and all of these balls are currently in the air. Now, that may change behind closed doors. Trump can always walk away from all of this if Putin doesn't give him some sort of concessions. Russia will have to bend at some point in time, but it's been an absolutely remarkable and extraordinary start to the attempts by Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine.
It should have been done immediately after it started, as opposed to now, 3 years later.